This is our first of many. I want to call it the Bronco Business Radio. We're launching a new way of transferring knowledge to some people within the university, outside the university, and this is one of many that we are anticipating doing with experts such as yourself. And thank you again for joining us for our very first one, our pilot program.
It's exciting.
Yeah, thanks. Robert, back in March, we had this forum, and it was right before the whole world decided to, close shop. And we asked attendees at that spring forecast to describe what the future of work meant to them. And in short, they said work needed to be collaborative, constantly flexible, more eyes on moving together as industries rather than competitive. Have you an opinion on this now, since we're 5 months into this? What are your thoughts?
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because on the day that the shutdowns were initially, or they were not quite announced officially, but we knew they were going to happen. I was teaching at Cal State Long Beach, and I actually had a talk on campus at Cal Poly Pomona on the day, I think it was the 11th or 12th of March. And so I was right there on campus and giving an economic outlook presentation on what things were going to look like with the shutdown. And I think back then it was very hard to know what the next several months would hold. But these points about collaboration and working together and so on, and the fact that we've all, I guess, out of necessity, embraced online virtual meetings such as this, really point to the fact that we, out of necessity, each of us has had to figure out a path forward, as have our organizations. And this is, virtual experience is no substitute for face-to-face. At least that's my observation. And but holy cow, where would we be if we did not have these tools that we could use, these 21st century tools that we can use today to enable all of us to come together and to engage in the previous session with the San Gabriel Valley Economic Partnership, and on this one. I think, our economy necessarily operates on the basis of, I don't know if it's equal parts collaboration and competition, but you've got to have a little bit of both. And it's competition that is driving people and businesses to try to figure out a path forward, because it's either a survival or a succeed motivation that is driving them to do so. And I'm, you saw my closing remarks. I'm forever in awe of the capacity of people in business and other organizations to be resourceful, especially when the chips are down, to figure out a path forward for their organization, for their households. And we just don't give enough credit to that aspect of our behavior as human beings and as a society trying to figure out a path forward. A lot of times we hear the call, and you heard me talk about the federal programs that served as a backstop for spending to private spending during the very difficult months. And yet, even so, the lion's share of the economy is private sector, and the private sector, a lot of individuals who are on the program and so on, had to sit down and figure out a path forward for their business, for their household, its finances, and so on. So, I know I'm wandering a little bit in response to your question, but I think we need to acknowledge the fact that we have the capability to work our way through this and to come out on the other end just as intact, or fully intact once again at some point. And we also need to keep in mind that the pandemic is something we will get under control one way or another. The Spanish flu is still with us, but has a much reduced presence. So we work our way through these things, and then we move on to bigger and better things.
You say that we're resilience, that our resilience and our path forward is what we are known for, not only in California, but, across the world. And I'm wondering what your take on entrepreneurship is within that definition, I guess, and how the outlook is for entrepreneurs and new businesses.
It's an interesting question. For one thing, I take my hat off to entrepreneurs. They take the risks that a lot of other people see but don't embrace, I guess you could say. And in fact, I've got a brother who is an entrepreneur in the medical technology arena, and was speaking with him last night. He said, that's what they do. Entrepreneurs take the flying leap that nobody else is willing to take. It's an important part of our economy advancing. Now, we got to give credit where credit is due. Entrepreneurship is a very important component of moving forward, as is the steady progress that we see with science and some of these other disciplines that figure out new ways of doing things and more innovative ways of doing things. So you've got that creativity component, but to commercialize that, to bring it to market, requires some entrepreneurship. So now I think there have been claims that the level of, or the entrepreneurship is just not as prevalent in the early 21st century as it might have been, let's say, during the 1990s. Or even the 1980s, but that was the heyday of the emergence of the World Wide Web. Technology was just exploding. The Silicon Valley and other parts of the country were as well. So I think entrepreneurship goes through its ups and downs, as do so many other phenomena. If it's not as evident today as it might have been 20 or 30 years ago, it may just be due to circumstances. So now tying what I said a moment ago back to that, clearly there are real opportunities for entrepreneurs at this point in time to figure out solutions that we desperately need to make our way through the next couple of years. I'm saying couple of years to fully recover from the pandemic. So we may get the disease under control in the next few months. Next few months, I'm talking like early 2021 if we're lucky. And then the recovery is still going to take some time. There are a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs to figure out bigger and better things that will help us get through that.
Yeah, I'm constantly amazed at again how small business owners just kind of rally and figure out how to make a living when they can't have their normal operations. I have a couple of questions based on a conversation that we had also, but I would like to also bring in Dr. Rowland in just a moment. And then we have some questions that are coming in the chat. But you had mentioned a couple of projects that relate to workforce development that you're working on and occupational projections. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're exploring there?
Well, sure. I think it's important to recognize, especially those of us who are in education, that the endpoint, when we have students pass through our academic institutions, on the other end, the question is, well, what kind of opportunities are there for them with respect to employment? Now, I got to be careful here because I was steeped in the liberal arts. So, I value a liberal arts education. I think it's very important to have a well-rounded education. So you don't just go to college to get a job, right? But still, it's an important aspect of completing your degree. Well, it's very hard for people, I think, in this day and age to really know what kind of occupations lie out there beyond the degree or beyond the associate's degree or even the high school diploma. So especially in this day and age, a lot of work goes into looking at trends in industries and then the associated trends in occupations. I think it should be no surprise that if you look at the occupations that are expected to grow over the next, say, 10 years, and there's some occupational projections that come out from the Bureau of Labor Statistics nationally and from the EDD here in the state of California. Many of them are in the healthcare related fields. Say the top 10, maybe 6 of them are in the 6 of the top 10 are in the healthcare related fields. And a couple are in tech, I think one that has been in the top 10 for the last few years in like solar panels or something like that. So on the one hand, you've got these well-defined occupations that show up at the top in the top 10. But more generally, I think we need to recognize that because our economy is evolving as quickly as it is, the talents and the skills that our occupations require are also evolving. And so it's kind of an issue of, with respect to workforce projections, equal parts of figuring out those specific occupations that are likely to be growing over the next several years, and at the same time figuring out the talents and skills and capabilities that people need to have in general in order to make a successful career or make their way through their working lifetime successfully. That second piece is much harder to do, certainly points to the need to engage in lifelong learning. You know, you may, even those of us who have terminal degrees in our fields have to continually refresh ourselves. And that's never been more true for just about every occupation out there other than maybe ditch digger.
I don't know. Shovels do evolve over periods of time.
That's right. You got to learn how to use the automated shovel.
Right. You know, you mentioned all of this that we are actually working on in the College of Business too, where we're talking about reskilling a new workforce or a re-entering workforce, and basically the skills that pay the bills, and communication fondly is what my area of expertise and what I teach at Cal Poly Pomona. Do you see any other basic skills that really need some honing in? Like what should we really be focusing in on?
Well, I think I kind of deal with this at a 5 to 10,000 foot level, as opposed to being an educator who, you know, people who just specialize in those aspects of education are probably better suited to answer those questions. Otherwise, I'd end up going off on my pet peeves, which of course are, not of course, but include, to your point, the importance of communication. You know, we can have all the great technical minds in the world, but if there's no communication of those great ideas, then there's a loss there. And so in my field, for example, one has to have sort of equal parts of technical and communication capabilities, and more of our of the areas of our economy and those occupations in those areas, I think, require both. The people who rise to the top in their profession and in their industries oftentimes are not just good at their technical talents, but also very good or more likely outstanding with respect to their communication skills and persuasion skills.
Thank you. You've created job security for me. Appreciate it. Dean Rowland, would you like to pose some questions for Dr. Kleinhenz?
Yeah, you know, no, I think that the answer, the question on the skills is an interesting one, right? In general, one of the things that we are tinkering with, we think. I think certainly Laura and myself and many of our colleagues that we communicate with on a daily and a weekly basis, we do think that the skills, those, how shall we call them, maybe hard skills, sometimes we call them soft skills, but there's a combination of hard and soft in there. Like you said, Robert, the communication piece is maybe a softer, and then there's the analytic skills that you have to have is a harder one. One of our things internally, certainly in the College of Business, is that we do think that there's a prelude to that, which is to really promote a growth type mindset or an entrepreneurial type mindset, not meaning that everybody's going to be an entrepreneur, but that we all focus on that ability to roll up our sleeves and fight an uphill battle. I mean, there are people out of jobs who I am sure are totally dismayed about their own professions because they were doing well, and then basically the floor fell from underneath them, and they probably don't see themselves on a pathway to a new thing. but in terms of your experience on the economy, which is, largely a psychological phenomenon, as we know, right? I mean, it's a response to everything we see in there, and it's an inclusion of everything we see in the markets. Do you have any recommendations on really that growth mindset? I mean, what do we tell people? We want people to get into to a reskilling situation. Is it, how do we really do this mindset piece? Is there something from the economics of the situation that will give people hope? And I think I saw some things today, but I'm just thinking on an overall basis, what are the things that will give people hope, assuming that they have this growth mindset to attack, kind of the next phase of learning that they have to engage with?
As some of you know, I not only have my affiliation with Cal Poly Pomona, but I also am teaching economics at Cal State Long Beach, and I taught for almost 20 years in a past life. These last few months, sitting behind the computer screen and talking to students, many of whom are upper division students or graduate students who are pursuing certificates or graduate programs and having to take economics, you can see the worry on their faces. I think it's important for us to reassure each other. We're all in this together. And there are a lot of times when I find that it's important to just sort of sit back, forget the content, and talk a little bit about what's going on, so people realize, especially young people, realize that the circumstances we're going through right now, maybe a number of us have faced, maybe not identical, but similar circumstances in our lives at certain points. And you just need to kind of I don't want to say chug along. You need to figure out how to pursue things and be persistent. So as I was listening to you, Eric, all I could think of, and I know this sounds really cliche, but Coach Lombardo from the Green Bay Packers said that success was what? 10% perspiration? No, 10% perspiration, 90% inspiration. I forget what the percentages were, but there's this inspiration aspect, this motivation that fire that people need to have, and the sense of self value, self-worth, and their ability to conquer things. And I think that is not an easy thing to instill in people. Some people are born with it, I know. Others acquire that. And so if you've got a part of your curriculum, and it may be embedded in that entrepreneurship aspect, that gets people to realize that they're developing a lot of skills. They're also developing the capacity to push beyond what they think are their limits. I mean, that's what is a college education but a survival test? And you hang in there long enough, and hopefully you succeed here and there. And if you're fortunate, you've succeeded on many different fronts, and then you come out at the other end with not just a degree, but you've learned a whole lot about yourself. Yeah. And one of those things I think we all need to hopefully learn through that education process is how deeply we can dig to make stuff happen when the chips are down. I don't know how else to characterize that. Right. It's not really, very eloquent.
You know what though? It is very eloquent, because we could talk statistics and data and forecasts all day long, but when it comes right down to it, it's really about, just sticking with it, being resilient, persevere, and, sometimes those things can't be taught, but we certainly can project them to our constituents, our students.
Yeah, let them know that it's by digging deep, you buy yourself another day, you buy yourself a new opportunity. So you dig deep and you keep your eyes wide open for those opportunities. This is where that entrepreneurship aspect is so important. Being mindful of the fact that there are opportunities out there. You just need to be ready for them, be ready to take advantage of them or capitalize on them. And so you really owe it to yourself and to your organization, to your household, your family, to really adopt that stance, which is to be alert to opportunities and be ready to take advantage of them. Does that sound like an entrepreneurial bent? Maybe. Um, and and they just know how to do it better than other people, maybe, or they're more risk prone. But even those people who are not risk prone should be ready to take advantage of opportunities in order to make their path forward in life.
Yeah, and certainly you don't want to stand on the sidelines and just dig your heels and wait. You've got to make things happen sometimes.
Yeah, I tell people, I tell young people, you know, you create your future, and you're the person who's in charge of your future. There's nobody else who's in a better position to create that outcome. It doesn't just happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Laura, can I make a comment? We have a question also from Carrie Ewing out here, asking if we're aware of emerging markets as a result of the pandemic. And I just want to say that, first of all, historically, when we have these kinds of challenges like the pandemic, we don't have this scale that often, but when we have these challenges, it is the most productive time in terms of developing new products and new services. So it is, you know, we have all the data from every time we run into a big issue like this. It is, people do actually get busy and roll up their sleeves. So there's much more activity. Her question, I guess, is, are there any particular markets that we are seeing as a result of that, you know? And I don't know, maybe Robert has seen that, but that's a...
Well, I'll just make one observation, maybe two. There are a lot of things that we have all gotten used to in recent months that we're already out there, right? So virtual meetings, there are many providers. We happen to be on Zoom. There are others. They've been around for a long time. And many of us have worked for organizations that have had subscriptions to them, but maybe we haven't used them all that often. And now all of a sudden we're doing so. So that's one observation. So there's a certain path that we were already on with respect to the adoption of technology, and it certainly has accelerated over the last few months. Now, the second example that I want to cite has to do with manufacturing, and it's a little bit more general, but during the Great Recession, we saw job counts really plunge in manufacturing. It was a part of a longer trend. So manufacturing employment in the United States has been falling since 1979. So it's not like the decline in manufacturing jobs has been something new. Many people think that the displacement of those jobs has been because of jobs moving to Mexico, to China, and some of our other trading partners that do so much of our 21st century manufacturing. But technology really has been one of the driving forces behind both, first, greater efficiency in that sector, and second, the loss of jobs, for better or for worse. That really accelerated during the Great Recession. So firms had to figure out a way to survive, not just within the current economic cycle, but also globally. And so they increasingly moved toward automation and adopted additional technology opportunity as the opportunities presented themselves. And I see that happening right now, not just in manufacturing, but in so many other segments of the economy. So to Eric's point, this is a time that just really brings, you could almost say it brings the best of resourcefulness out in people because it's out of necessity, you know.
It's true. And you know, the I guess you can call them the side hustles now may become your main source of income too. Whatever you've been maybe doing on the side, you can now bring into your world as its main source. I know that we have many in the audience that have stayed that might want to unmute themselves and ask questions on their own, because I would love to hear your voice as well. So if you would like to, just unmute, and I don't know if you want to raise a hand. I think we should just go for it. You should just talk out loud and ask Dr. Kleinhenz, and we'll see what comes out of that. I certainly have a list, but I'd rather hear from the audience.
Likewise. Got a bashful bunch.
Mm-hmm.
We're figuring out how to unmute.
So if that's the question, then, you know, the bottom left of your screen, there's probably the bottom of the screen should be a black stripe. And on the far left, you've got a mute, unmute microphone.
Hi, Dr.
So,
Kleinhenz, Brad
go.
Jensen from the partnership. How you doing?
Good.
I have a quick question for you. Just looking at kind of the economic recovery, do you feel like there's a lot of concerns now, especially about energy prices in California? Part of that is just the ongoing wildfires and how that affects our electrical utilities, but also the very high price that we're paying in California. Our industrial electricity cost is about 100% higher than most other states. How do you feel that that will affect, I think, kind of the energy sector moving forward? How will that affect the recovery here in California?
So early on, I showed some numbers at the national level more so than at the state or local level about what was happening with energy and mining employment. Really took a hit at the beginning of the year and then has come back. I have to view the energy sector globally because, you know, energy prices are determined globally. And so in that regard, I think that sector of the economy is going to struggle for some time to come. To our benefit, I guess I would say, in the sense that I would expect things like gasoline prices to stay much lower than we'd otherwise have expected. But you're right, our electricity prices per kilowatt hour are about double what they are nationally and have been really for quite some time, which one could argue that that's created challenges for industries that rely on those industrial rates to be competitive, both nationally and globally. And we don't necessarily, I don't have the depth of knowledge to be able to talk about authoritatively about whether or not those high energy rates have driven certain industries out of California. I would just point out, and I'm getting a little bit off topic, but I think it's a good opportunity for me to say this, that, you know, we're not necessarily known as a manufacturing state, but we still have a significant manufacturing presence. And in Southern California, you may or may not know that of all the metropolitan areas in the country, we have either the largest or second largest number of manufacturing jobs in the nation. So manufacturing's not gone away despite this high cost of utilities that we happen to have here in California. I think that, you know, the magnitude of the fires that we're experiencing this year is unprecedented, but I don't think that's going to necessarily jeopardize oil and those utilities over the future. But there may be a need for the state to figure something out for the electric utilities to the extent that their infrastructure has been damaged, and it may be beyond the scope of their insurance claims to be able to recover that. And this is really, you know, unfortunately for so many people, not just here in Southern California, but across the West Coast, this is just an unfortunate set of circumstances right now. Hope I answered your question, at least in part.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Anyone else?
Good afternoon. My name is Scott Magukin, and I'm curious, entertainment and media are very big here in the greater Los Angeles area, as is conventions and tourism. Right. And I was wondering if you had any insight as to the recovery of those industries with people working from home and not gathering together, insight into that.
So my first observation would be based on what we saw happen after 9/11. Those of you who were around, you know, paying attention to the economy at the time will know that conventions changed quite dramatically, as did the use of air transportation, very much like what we're dealing with right now. although the reasons were different. It took several years for I don't know how long it took for the convention business to recover, but I know it took several years for the passenger volumes on airplanes to recover from the 9/11 situation. And I think that we've got a fairly steep road ahead for the convention business, barring the discovery and dissemination of the vaccine. You know, I mean, as soon as we are able to overcome the disease, the COVID-19 disease, then I think we'll look at resuming normal behavior in that sector. But right now, you know, I spoke during the course of my presentation about all of these sports events that are taking place with virtual audiences or cut out cardboard audiences sitting in the stands. It's going to be a long time if we don't get the virus under control, and if we don't figure out the right sort of protocols that are, you know, universally accepted. They're out there. It's just that not everybody's accepting or using them. It's going to take some time, both for those entertainment and arts kinds of venues and the Disneylands and so on, before they come back. And similarly for the sort of business meeting and convention center environment, I think that that's also a challenge. I know that there is concern, you know, in the convention business, for example, the lead time to get convention space booked is not measured in months or weeks, it's measured in years. So the convention business and these convention centers up and down the state are really having a difficult time. They had, you know, wholesale cancellations of events that were expected to drive revenue during the year 2020. And they don't know which end is up in the year 2021 at this point. And yet the organizations, the entities, the trade associations that book these events, the companies that book these events are kind of chomping at the bit to know how that's going to look. And it's really, in my observation, it's going to be dictated by how successful we are with the virus and with the vaccine. Once we get some clarity there, I think we'll be able to see that part of our sector, of our economy, get back on track. It's going to be one of the slower recovering segments of the economy, at least based on what we're looking at so far. Hope that helps.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And you know, I have so many colleagues that are in the hospitality industry. Part of my career is to do chef work, and you know, I'm not doing much of that now, but you know, to get people back into their contracts, like you said, it's not months, it's years that they've booked these events. They have these dangling contracts now waiting to be fulfilled, and it's just like, when can we do this? Is it even possible? And do we then just give people their money back? So there's another fiscal aspect there as well.
Absolutely. So I don't know if you were looking for a response, but you know, a lot of communities rely heavily on things like bed taxes as a source of revenue for their general funds. And that's particularly true here in the state of California. So for example, yesterday I spoke to a national audience, and we talked about the local and fiscal situation in many other states. In many other states, local government relies more heavily on property taxes than we do here in the state of California. Our property taxes largely go to state and also to school districts, and a relatively small amount, and many portions of our property tax payments go to dedicated purposes. So very relatively small amount, if any, portion of it goes into the city's general fund, for example, Pomona's general fund. Sales tax and bed taxes are the major sources of those revenues, and visitors to our communities, like to the Pomona the fairgrounds, or to the Long Beach Convention Center, the LA Convention Center, or out in the Inland Empire, those facilities, and so many meeting centers in the San Gabriel Valley. The bed taxes, and then the tax proceeds from food and retail on the part of these visitors is really important to an important contribution to the coffers for these cities. So that loss in recent months and going forward is effectively jeopardizing the budgets of many of the communities in which we live. So I'm sure we've all heard of our communities either facing budget cuts. They may have already passed budgets for 2021 that include certain budget cuts. That's something that's going to be with us for a while.
Mm-hmm. For sure, for sure. I wanted to be respectful of your time, Dr. Kleinhenz. You gave us more than the 30 minutes that I asked for.
Okay.
But I just wanted to tell you this. Speaking of the Fairplex, they had a drive-through get your fair food event where you could basically sit in your car, order your funnel cake and fried butter, and then drive through and pick up your food. And I thought that is just ridiculous. But you know what? People were spending 3 hours in the line to get their fair food. So back to the whole resilience and trying to get to a place where we can start making good incomes again and getting people back to work. I think that's just one of the many ways that we're doing it.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed out on that opportunity, but holy cow, it's equal parts support for the institution and, getting the gratification you can get from eating lots of sugar, fat, salt, and things like that, makes you feel better. Not you, but makes the visitors feel better. We are in this together, and we just need to keep that in mind as we figure out a way forward, and we will end up succeeding in a matter of months or so. And as I said at the outset, some industries are harder hit than others. They will take longer to recover. The top level numbers that we hear about in the news are going to show that pain long after many of us are back fully on our feet. So the sooner we get back on our feet and get moving forward, the better it will be for everybody else.
Absolutely.
Thanks everybody for your time today.
Thank you for our pilot episode of Bronco Business Radio, and to the audience that stayed, I thank you for your time as well. Dean Roland and the team at the San Gabriel Valley Economic Forecast Summit today. We did a good job, I think, bringing this virtually to you. And thank you for having me as your MC. And we'll see you in, hopefully, the spring.